Alright, hello. I wasn't expecting the NBC roster predictions video to do so well, so I decided why not do one for another franchise, specifically another Capcom crossover series that I really like, Capcom Vs SNK. Don't expect these to be normal videos. I'm still gonna be making like scripted videos. You can tell from my voice, I'm a bit sick at the moment, and I'm still working on a script for a bigger video. So for now, I want to do another one of these unscripted roster prediction videos because thankfully, the same person that made the NBC tier list thing also made one for Capcom vs SNK. Wow, God, still can't talk properly. So yeah, same thing with the NBC roster. I'm gonna do 22 characters on the Capcom side, 22 characters on the SNK side, and 6 characters for the DLC. Though I decided to make it one less season of DLC just to make it shorter, because if you didn't watch that NBC video, it was a bit long. So I'm not sure how long this is gonna be, but I wanted to at least make it somewhat shorter. So anyway, let's get started. So as for like what I mainly want to do with this roster, is that thankfully with CVS not really having that many games, only like 3 games compared to like the Marvel games, I think that we can get a bit more creative with what the roster has. But like I feel like primarily it's gonna be like KOF and like Street Fighter characters. As you see, just like the NBC roster, I included characters that were pretty self-explanatory to be on the roster. The four big Street Fighter characters, plus like Morgan from Darkstalkers, because obviously you gotta have her. She's in like every crossover. And then like 2 of the big players in KOF, and then Terry, Mai, and Geese, because those are the biggest Fatal Fury characters by far. And especially with Terry and Mai being in Street Fighter 6, they gotta be in this crossover. So first off, for the Street Fighter side, we're gonna have Guile. Guile, he is the charge character. So I'm not surprised if he makes it on this roster. He probably should have also been on the list with like obvious characters. And you know what? Let's just get 2 other characters that I think are very obvious picks out of the way on the Capcom side. Those will be Cammy and Zangief. Both of these characters are very obvious to be in this game, as they are they are like some of the most iconic characters to come out of Street Fighter 2 and just Street Fighter in general. So it'd be weird not having them in the game. So I think it feels right that they're there alongside the other Street Fighter characters. But for the rest of this roster, I think I want to keep these as the only characters from Street Fighter 2, because man, Street Fighter 2 just bloats every roster for every like fighting game that Capcom makes, whether it be CVS or Street Fighter or even NBC. So for now, these will be the only Street Fighter 2 characters, at least for the base roster. I should also say that if you thought that my roster in NBC was a bit biased, this is definitely going to have even more bias, because I feel like there's definitely a bit more freedom with the choices that I can make. So as for the next choice, it is going to be a Street Fighter Alpha character, and that is Dan. Dan is kind of like a great example of the relationship of Capcom vs SNK, because if you didn't know, Dan was actually a parody of an SNK character named Ryo from Art of Fighting, which, you know, maybe later in the list, who knows. But he was a parody because Ryo obviously is kind of similar to Ryu, but I feel like they have enough differences make them unique, besides the fact that they're both Shotos. So Dan was a parody, and that was kind of like the start of their little feud they had back in like the early 90s with the fighting game boom. But Dan also kind of represents CVS, because when they released CVS 1 Pro, Dan was on the cover alongside another SNK character. He even won that game's story mode tournament, which I always thought was really funny and a really cool thing, because, you know, Dan kind of represents the relationship that these two companies have. And next up for Street Fighter Alpha characters, we got Sakura. she is like one of the most popular characters from Street Fighter Alpha. She's a great character. She's one of my favorite Street Fighter characters, and yeah, it's like it would be kind of wrong to have her not be in this game. And also it feels like, even though she was just in Street Fighter 5, it just feels too long since she's been in a Street Fighter game, and I can't wait for her as DLC in Street Fighter 6. So I need my playable Sakura in a new fighting game, so make it happen in this one. Alright, next up I want to include some Third Strike characters. Third Strike usually gets ignored a lot in like recent Capcom fighting games, and they usually take forever to get added, but we're going to change that in this one. And the first character is a character that is a fan favorite in Street Fighter and Third Strike in general, as Dudley. He'd be our resident boxer in this game, and he hasn't been in a Street Fighter game since Street Fighter 4. He's a really fun character. He has a very recognizable personality, and I think he deserves to be in more games because he's just so cool. I love this guy. And next up, another Street Fighter Third Strike character. Here she is, Makoto, also from Third Strike. As you can tell from what I said earlier, man, I'm just terrible without a script. But Makoto, another fan favorite Street Fighter Third Strike character that I think deserves to be in this game because, well, she's a fan favorite for a reason. She was #1 highest voted, like, most popular Street Fighter character on like an old poll that they did. So I think now's a good time to bring her back in a game. I have a feeling that they might actually put her in Street Fighter 6. That's one of my personal predictions, that they will put her in Street Fighter 6. But you know what? You can't go wrong with more Makoto. So I'd like to see her in this game. I would put Elena here because she is one of my favorite Street Fighter 3 characters, period. But she's already in 6, and I want to give some spotlight to some other Street Fighter 3 characters. Alright, so next up, I want to at least have one Street Fighter 4 character, and I think it's pretty obvious what Street Fighter 4 character that would be, and that would be Juri. Like, no competition. She is not just one of the most popular characters to come out of Street Fighter 4, she's one of the most popular characters to come out of modern Street Fighter in general after its revival with 4. Like, everyone loves Juri, he's a great character, and by far the most interesting character to put in most fighting games. As you can guess with what I am saying, you can notice a trend. I'm at least trying to get like every mainline Street Fighter game to have some sort of representation in this game. So obviously next up is Street Fighter 5. Now the obvious choice for 5 would probably be Rashid, as he is kind of like the protagonist, or the character that they're pushing the most, especially with the fact that he returned in Street Fighter 6 alongside Ed. But I'm gonna go for a less obvious choice, and that is Menat. Menat is also a popular character from Street Fighter 5. I will not be surprised if she ends up returning in Street Fighter 6. I think she has a really cool gimmick with the orb and stuff. It makes her very unique. And also, I just really like her design. She has one of my favorite Street Fighter designs in recent memories. I think she's a cool character, so I want her in over Rashid. Now, as for our last Street Fighter character, as you can guess, it is a Street Fighter 6 character. Now, I debated whether or not it would be Manon or Marissa, because I don't think it'd be too interesting having Luke in this game. I think that we need a more diverse character, and because I already put Makoto, who's like primarily a punching character, I know they aren't exactly the same, but they're kind of the same deal. And I noticed that we don't have a lot of grapplers. I decided to go with Manon. I think that she will fill a void. She is a pretty cool character and a fan favorite in 6. I'm going a lot with fan favorites, and yeah, I think that we should at least get one 6 character, so I think we should go with Manon. Alright, even though we escaped Street Fighter, we're gonna still be a bit Street Fighter adjacent by including 2 characters that are in the Street Fighter universe. And those 2 characters are Cody and, where is she? Maki. Now, I picked Cody and Maki. Well, Cody, because I think Cody's cool. He is technically the protagonist of Final Fight, and I always liked his little gimmick. Personally, if you ask me which Cody I prefer It's Prison Cody, so that's the one that I like, the version of him that showed up in Street Fighter Alpha. And Maki is a callback to CBS 2, which was one of her first fighting games ever, and she's only ever been in like the PSP version of Street Fighter Alpha 3, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to probably Google that later, but I always liked her. I think that she's a cool character, and it'll be a nice little throwback to CBS 2 if they included her. So yeah, Cody and Monkey will be the representation for the Final Fight series. Now, as you noticed, Morgan is all by her lonesome. I always felt that it was wrong that in all the CBS games besides like SVC Chaos that Morgan was the only Darkstalkers character, so I at least have wanted to include one more, and that one is going to be Donovan. Now, I was originally also thinking about Felicia, but you know, Felicia's already showed up a decent amount in like MVC and stuff, and I think Donovan's more interesting because Donovan hasn't really been in many crossover games, because even though he is technically one of the protagonists of one of the Darkstalkers games, his entire dynamic with him not trying to give in to his vampire roots is very interesting, and I think that makes him a cool character, and I think he deserves to be in more games, especially if they're never gonna make another Darkstalkers game. It'd be cool to see Donovan in this one. These next three characters I am solely basing off of one reason and one reason alone, and that is the Capcom Fighting Collection 2. In Capcom Fighting Collection 2, it obviously, the big headline was that it included the CBS games, but also included a bunch of other fighting games. So those other fighting games are what I'm basing these next three characters off of. And the first one is a rival school character. I'm going with Akira. Pretty much, it's the same logic that I had with Batsu in Marvel vs. Capcom, where Akira is really just like, it could be any character from rival school, honestly, and I think that would be cool. I just picked Akira because she's the most popular, and I already had Batsu on my last roster, so you know, some diversity would be nice. So I decided to go with Akira. Also, she was in Street Fighter 5, so they already probably have like a model for her to work with. And Akira is the rival school representative. Next up, I think that a Power Stone character should be in this game, seeing how the fact that both Power Stone games are going to be included in the collection with CBS. So I am picking Wang Ting. I think he's probably one of the coolest Power Stone characters. Just like with Akira, I already included Edward Falcon in the MVC roster, and I wanted something different. And Wang Tang is really cool. He can have like a fucking install super, or he can turn into his Power Stone form, which is pretty much Wukong, and I think that's really cool. He can do fucking spirit bombs for supers. I definitely have to tone him down a bit to fit with the CBS style, but hey, I think he'd be a cool character. Alright, and lastly, for these characters that I am basing off of their inclusion in the recent collection, that would be Hayato from Star Gladiator / Plasma Sword / whatever. He was really cool in MVC 2. It was a shame that he was a pretty low tier character, and I think he could easily fit in CBS. He's like Plasma Sword and Star Gladiator is just such a cool franchise. I mean, I know it's like literally just a Star Wars ripoff because it was originally supposed to be a Star Wars game, but I think these characters deserve a second chance, and they are finally getting their second chance. People are finally going to acknowledge their existence, so let's go with the protagonist of the series, Hayato. Seems how in fact he's already got some experience with crossovers, and yeah, those are the characters that I'm including solely because they share a collection with the CBS games. Now, the final character that I want to include for the base roster, at least on the Capcom side, is Megaman.exe. Now, I got multiple reasons why. First off, if I'm aware correctly, Mega Man was planned to be in a CBS game, but it never happened alongside like Leon, which, you know, maybe I should have put a Resident Evil character, but we'll ignore that for now. And secondly, I went with .exe because he's a Mega Man character that hasn't really been in that many fighting games. There's only like one fighting game he was in, and I'm pretty sure it was like an Onimusha platform fighter, which is pretty weird. But I think he should show up in some more crossover games because this is a very popular version of Mega Man, and I think that would be cool. And yeah, that's all the characters for the Capcom side of this roster for the base roster. So now moving on to the SNK side. Alright, so let's start off with adding some OG Fatal Fury characters, at least 2 that I think should be in this game. And that is Kim, and the other one that I would like to see in this game is Joe. Now, Kim, I have a lot more reasons of wanting. Kim's one of my personal favorite SNK characters in general. I absolutely think he's like hilarious with his entire story of wanting to correct evildoers by forcing them to fight alongside him. I absolutely love his character. He's one of my favorites personally, and it doesn't help that it also helps that he's very fun to play in the games. And Joe, I am largely gonna be honest with you, I only picked Joe because I want to see him and Dan interact with each other. I don't even have Andy, you know, the other major character of the big trio of the first Fatal Fury game, but I picked Joe solely just so we could parallel Dan again, because I still think that that was hilarious that they made those 2 the winners of the first CVS game, at least in CVS Pro. Obviously, with the big deal that Fatal Fury is coming back with the sequel to Mark of the Wolves, I think it's very clear that we should have a character from Mark of the Wolves that is showing up in this new game. And obviously, I gotta go with one of my favorite SNK characters, Rock Howard. The coolness of both tearing geese in one character, it's just he's so cool. And like, CVS is one of my favorite games to play him in as, and I can't wait to see this new Fatal Fury game. And I want at least 2 more characters. So the first one that I decided to go with is T-Zoc. I specifically want T-Zoc, even though the website has his King of Dinosaur persona. I always prefer the T-Zoc. I just think the mask is cooler. And like, once again, more grappler representation in this roster. And yeah, it will also be a good representation of the new Mark of the Wolves game. So I wanted to include at least one more Mark of the Wolves character, and I decided originally I was gonna go for B. Jeanette, but instead I decided to go with Hotaru. I'm mainly picking her because I have a friend who plays her, and also I like her design a lot. At least, and like B. Jeanette, I feel like she's already had her time in the spotlight. Like, she's already coming back for this new game, City of the Wolves, and she also was on Team Mark of the Wolves for KOF 15. So she's had her time to shine. I think another character from Mark of the Wolves and like City of the Wolves should be like a new representative, and I'm pretty sure she hasn't even been in like a KOF game besides like the PS2 port of one of them. I don't remember which one. Now, on the topic of Fatal Fury, if we're still in this universe, we should talk about another series that is part of the Fatal Fury universe, and that's Art of Fighting, especially because recently they announced that they were going to do a new Art of Fighting game, and I'm interested to see how that goes. So first off, we obviously got to have the protagonist of Art of Fighting, and that's Ryo. As I mentioned with Dan, a lot of people were making comparisons between Ryo and Ryu, and I can't really blame them. Both like Shoto archetypes, and also the names are very similar. But I still like Ryo, and he's an important SNK character that definitely deserves to be in and continue being in more SNK games. And another character that's very synonymous with Art of Fighting is Robert Garcia. Robert was actually the protagonist of an Art of Fighting game, which is very rare to see a side character. Oh, I just realized I accidentally put him in DLC, but he used to be a side character in previous Art of Fighting games. He was pretty much like the Ken to Ryo, who was like Ryu in this situation. But in Art of Fighting 3, he actually took over as the main character, which is actually where where these designs kind of been inspired by in more recent KOF games. And Robert's just cool. Robert's just cool. So yeah, definitely including him there. In the last Art of Fighting character that I will be including in the roster is Yuri. I mean, she's iconic, and also she's a good parallel to Sakura. I love the art that her and Sakura that they did for the older CVS games. Just makes sense. And also, like, with Dan, they've also like parodied Yuri a couple times with like Dan's sister, and like I think it was like actually in like one of those Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter games, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I think that they should obviously include Yuri in this game. So similar in vein to what I did for Street Fighter, I want to at least have representation from each saga of KOF, because if you don't know, KOF is separated into different sagas depending on the lore, so that we don't get like a representation from literally every single KOF game, because there are a lot of those. And we already have the two characters that I want to represent the Orochi saga, which are the two obvious choices, Kyo and Iori. But as for the Nest saga, this might be an obvious choice and a biased choice at that, but K-Dash is just such a cool character. I love him, and I think he has like a very unique style to him to make him different from Kyo, even though in KOF lore he is a clone of Kyo. And if we're putting K-Dash, we definitely gotta include another popular character from the Nest saga, and that is Kula, another one of my favorite characters from KOF in general. She's always on my teams whenever I get the chance to have her in a KOF game, and I absolutely love her design and her personality and everything. And yeah, I will also be saying that even though I did pick K-Dash and Kyo to like represent their respective sagas, for the other two sagas I am not picking the protagonist of those sagas. I'm gonna be doing something different. Alright, so next up, the character that I want to represent the Ash saga is, even though it's not named after her, I want Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a unique character. She played a very important role in that saga as one of Ash's closest friends. I think she's a cool character. Once again, like the designs. I like the designs of a lot of these characters, clearly. And yeah, and for our last saga, the New Age saga that just recently finished, I had to include at least one KOF 15 character, and it's very clear which one I should include. Isla, my favorite character from KOF 15. As you can tell, this roster has a lot of bias, but you know, it's my roster. You can't judge me. Just kidding, you can. But Isla is my favorite character. I think she is very unique. She has like a stand, and also like the spray paint aesthetic. It feels perfect. And in fact, I think she would actually fit more in Street Fighter 6 than Terry and Mai, but that's a different discussion. Next up, a character that I probably should have put on the obvious side, if you know anything about SNK, and that's Athena. She's appeared in like almost every fucking crossover that SNK has done, especially in KOF, and one of my favorite things about her is that she always has a unique design in every game she's in. So obviously I want them to continue this trend in this game. And yeah, very obvious choice of character and one of SNK's oldest franchises. Now, obviously, I need to include some Samurai Showdown representation, and you can't tell, I pushed all three of the characters that I wanted to the top because I'm going to go over them very quickly, and that is the Samurai Showdown team from KOF 15, because I think this is the perfect representation for Samurai Showdown. We have the two iconic, like, original characters, and then we have the recent character from the latest Samurai Showdown game. None of them are really my mains in Samurai Showdown, but I still think this is like the perfect Samurai Showdown representation. And for the final character on the base roster for the SNK sign is a character that I am still baffled never showed up in this game, let alone her series representation in general, and that is Fio from Metal Slug. Metal Slug is iconic. It's a very important part of SNK's history, but like they never really had a character in a KOF game. And like the only time that I can think of a Metal Slug character showing up in like a fighting game is SVC Chaos, where they pick the fucking aliens from Metal Slug X as a character instead of any of the characters that you actually play as, which is crazy. So I picked Fio because she's the most popular character, mainly because she's very marketable because she's an attractive female, but you know, she's also one of my favorite characters to play as in Metal Slug, even though they all kind of play the same. But yeah, this is the base roster for the game, so now let's go to the DLC. So as my first DLC choice, I noticed that we have obviously some samurai representation on the SNK side, and I know Capcom has a popular samurai series that hasn't had an entry in a while, and I decided to go with Soki, mainly because one thing, he's already been in a fighting game, and another thing, I'm not sure with the entire rights issue with Onimusha, because Onimusha, a lot of the characters, especially like the protagonist of the first Onimusha game, which I can't remember the name at the moment, they're based off of real celebrity likenesses. So I believe that if we're gonna get like Onimusha in a fighting game again, then they'll probably do Soki again, because that's what they did for Tatsunoko vs Capcom. Next up is a character that was actually close to being added into the base roster, but I had to pick between her and Athena, and I decided to go with Athena, but I think is an important character to SNK, and that is Leona. A lot less for the character itself, but what she represents, because in previous CVS games, I noticed that we've never had any representation for the Akari Warriors, when alongside the Athena games is one of SNK's oldest franchises and most important franchises. So Leona kind of fits in as the Akari Warriors representative, and she's also just a popular character all around. Alright, next up we have Tessa. Oh, not you, sorry. But Tessa. Tessa is another character that has made appearances in CBS in the form of SVC Chaos, and I was also considering her for the base roster. I think that SNK definitely was a fan of her, that's why they included her in SVC Chaos, and out of all the like Red Earth characters, she's the one that shows up the most in like crossovers and stuff. That's why I was actually also considering not including her, but also I think that she has the most interesting potential for a moveset, being like a sorcerer and everything. Alright, next up I got another Art of Fighting character, and a pretty important character to KOF and SNK in general, and that's King. She's always been the leader of the female teams in KOF games, and she is a fan favorite character, or a character that I'm a big fan of. I love her design, and not to be confused with the character from Tekken. Once again, another character that I was considering. In fact, I was actually going to either have Robert or King be part of the Art of Fighting representation, but I decided to go with Robert, but I still wanted her to be in the roster, so I decided to put her in the first wave of DLC. Next up is, once again, another extremely biased pick from me, I think you'll notice, and that is Sagat. Sagat is one of my mains in Street Fighter next to Ken. I've always loved his story that he's had with his relationship with Ryu, and he also has some relevance in CBS for some infamous reasons, but I still love Sagat, and I think that he should be included in this game. Took me a bit to find this character, and that is the last character for our first season of DLC, and that's Tacoma. Sorry, I can't pronounce him, but I mainly know him as Mr. Karate. Mr. Karate is quite synonymous with KOF and Art of Fighting. You know, the dad of Yuri and Rio, and he's always been another personal favorite of mine. And even though as this roster it has his like face, him without the mask, I would want Mr. Karate in this game, where he puts on his mask and dons his persona. Alright, so next up is another very interesting choice, and that is Zero, specifically, I don't know if they have this on the website, but specifically the version of Zero in the Mega Man Zero games. If you don't know, just like Tessa and some of the other characters that I mentioned in SVC Chaos, they included Zero as a playable character, and they specifically used the Mega Man Zero version of him. So that's the version that I would like to see in this game. It would be a cool little callback to that game, because as much as we criticize SVC Chaos, I think it had a very interesting roster. Next up, I would like to see Hibiki. Hibiki was in Last Play 2, and one of her only appearances outside Last Play 2 that I could think of before showing up as DLC in Samurai Showdown was actually in CVS 2. So Capcom specifically wanted her because they thought she was a cool character, and she is a cool character. And Last Blade, I've played a bit of it, and I did actually really like Hibiki. She may feel similar to the Samurai Showdown characters, but I think she has a lot to diversify herself from those characters, and I think that should be a good choice to appear in this game. Next up is a character who made an appearance in CVS 2 and also in Street Fighter Alpha, just like Maki, and that's Eagle. Eagle's first appearance was in Street Fighter 1, and he made a reappearance in CVS 2 with a cool redesign and just like a really cool moveset and everything. Just everything about him is just cool. I really like Eagle, and I think it's a shame that his only other appearance was in Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the PSP, I'm pretty sure. So I think that Eagle, this should be his time to shine, as this big redesign happened in CVS. Next up is a character that I also should have probably included on the base roster, and that is Benimaru. Benimaru has been in every KOF game. He's always been on the side of the protagonist of those games, no matter what. So it felt a bit weird not including him, and I definitely almost forgot about him, so I decided that he should be DLC, seeing how he is a very important character to KOF. Alright, next up, I want another Darkstalkers character, and I want one that hasn't been in a game for a while, just like Donovan, and that is BB Hood. She's a very interesting character. I don't really know much about her lore, but I've always thought that it was very comedic, that she's like a Little Red Riding Hood that uses guns and hunts Darkstalkers. So that is her main reason. She is a fan favorite character, and I like one of her supers in MVC2, so nothing more about it. And also, I noticed that on the SNK side, we don't have a lot of boxing characters, so I'm picking one of my favorite boxing characters, and that is Vanessa. Vanessa, she's pretty cool. She's a secret agent. She's always been on Team Agents or on the many KOF female teams, and she is, as I said, a personal favorite of mine, and you can complain about bias as much as you want. Alright, so next up is a character who's been in a lot of Capcom crossovers, but's never made an appearance in a CVS game, and that is Strider Hiryu. For one thing, I noticed that we don't really have too many ninja characters on the game, and Strider is just cool. He's an iconic part of Capcom, and I think that I know that his moveset is very crazy and off the walls in MVC, and this is a lot more like Street Fighter-esque in its gameplay style, but I think you can get it to work in a way, make him similar to the sword characters that I already have on the roster. And next up, a character that I was also wanting to put on the base roster, but couldn't, in a fan favorite character, and that is Angel, or Angel, however you pronounce it. I like her design for reasons, and she's a fan favorite character. I like my fan favorites, and I also realized that SNK only has one grappler, so I at least want to include another grappler, and she is one of the most iconic grapplers in that series. I see a lot of art of her on my timeline. Alright, next up, I feel like it's criminal that I haven't put a Resident Evil character on here, and he was already almost going to be in a CVS game. And you know, maybe it's the bias again, because Leon, yes, he is my favorite Resident Evil character. Maybe I should have gone with Chris or Jill, but I decided, or even Ada. I decided to go with Leon because, you know, he's my favorite, and he was almost going to be in the CVS franchise. So I feel like at least one Resident Evil character will get in this game. Now, while making this roster, I feel like I didn't include enough weird choices in this roster, and there's been one character that's always perplexed me in his addition to the series, and that is Mars People, aka the aliens from the Metal Slug series. And I always thought it was such a wacky choice to include him in SVC Chaos, and I did make fun of that choice before, but I can't lie that I kind of love that choice. And I think that if in any way you can put him in DLC without annoying too many people, I really like this choice. I love how fucking stupid it is, and it's just, I feel like this game needs a bit more goofy, weird characters, and I think Mars People is a good choice for them. And lastly, if you remember, in my MVC video, I always want the final characters for any game to kind of go out with a bang. And I think that the two characters to go out with a bang for this game would be Akuma and Rugal. I've already mentioned in the MVC video why I think Akuma is kind of stuck to forever be DLC in most fighting games, seeing how he's so popular. And Rugal is also probably in that same boat, solely because he was also DLC in KOF 15, and to be fair, he was free in that, which I appreciate. The main reason why these two were last is because specifically, I don't just want it to just be Akuma and Rugal. I want to see Shin Akuma and God Rugal from CVS 2. Now, I want them. I obviously want Akuma and Rugal also in the game, but I want it so that as soon as you have them in the game, you can also play as those versions of the characters. I think that'd be super cool, and also have them as bosses that you can fight as soon as they get added, similar to what KOF 15 did with Rugal, having him be a boss that you can fight, and make it in the style of that classic SNK artificial difficulty. So yeah, this is the entire roster. I hope I didn't make this as long as the MVC video, and if I did, I'm sorry. But yeah, I hope you guys like this video. I plan to make actual proper scripted videos in the future. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.